Hey everyone! Thanks again for tuning in to Live with RYE. I'm your host RYE, and I'm so thankful you tuned in. Before I begin, I just want to thank you all for your continued love and support. It means so much to me, and I could not do this without you. These last few weeks have been incredible, so thank you so much. Now, before we begin, I do have a favor to ask you. If you're watching on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Live with RYE, and you'll get to see all of my other YouTube videos as well. It also helps me out. If you're watching on Facebook, hit that like button and like my Facebook page. Also, be sure to follow me across social media at RYE the News Guy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I love hearing from all of you, and let's continue the conversation. So follow me at RYE the News Guy. And lastly, you'll see my website scrolling across the bottom of the screen, ryeTheNewsGuy.com. Head over there to rewatch every episode of Live with RYE that you may have missed, including all of my other exclusive content, including interviews, news, reviews, and the launch of my new production company, RYE Productions. So now, without further ado, help me welcome my two very special guests. They are just incredible. Morgan Smith and Augie Greenwood, creators of Averno. Hello.
Hi.
Oh my goodness. It is so great to see both of you. Thank you so much for doing this. Wow.
Thank you for having us. This is so exciting.
Oh, my pleasure. How are you doing today?
We are vibing. We are. Just finished our school days.
Okay. Yes. Are you remote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Well, fortunately.
Yes.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah, I bet, of course. So let's get into it. Where did the idea for Averno come from, and what made you decide to make it a transmedia experience rather than your typical cookie cutter musical?
So I started writing Averno almost exactly a year ago. Averno celebrated its first birthday 2 days ago.
Happy birthday.
It was very exciting. We had a little live stream, had a little cupcake and stuff. It was very cute. And I began writing Averno first technically as a collection of short stories at a writing conference. I didn't even realize that was what I was doing. I just became almost haunted by this small town and these witches in these woods. And then a year later, I wrote this musical called Wayward Sisters. And I realized that I was possessed by the place that they lived in than the stories of the girls themselves. Although I do love that story. Mm-hmm. And essentially I realized after writing this musical that I really wanted to dig into this space. And I've always had an issue with, having trouble sticking to only one story. I began my career as a writer with being a fantasy novelist and writing musicals, plays, TV shows, graphic novels, and I wanted a way to be able to write all of these projects and not have to be constantly gear switching between universes. So I was essentially like, what if I took my love for world building and I took my love for this new world that I just discovered, and instead of constantly having to jump ship from one place to another, I just really sort of dug in on this one place and saw what it could become. And that's how Averno started. It was initially this musical, Wayward Sisters, and then the first piece of media after that was the podcast Live from Averno. That was the first piece that got released. And we just recently revamped it. It is now, new episodes are coming out again, which is exciting. And from there, it just kept growing.
Yes.
The first 6 months or so, I was pretty much writing it on my own. My partner, Jamie, was also writing on the podcast. But other than that, it was pretty much just me. And then in April of this past year, Augie and I began collaborating on it, and it exploded from there and now has a team of about 60. And now Averno is me as well. Yeah. So.
It's just taken over.
Yeah, truly.
So it's interesting because Averno, as you said, it's its own sort of universe. It's what I found interesting is it's got 3 locations in Averno, the town, because the website is avernotownship.com, and it's got 3 locations: the town, the school, and the forest. Could you tell me what those represent in Averno?
Mm-hmm. So the 3 main locations stemmed essentially from me wanting to be able to explore 3 very distinct kind of aesthetics and storylines. The town is a very sort of Southern Gothic, conspiracy theory, dark, more horror-based location. The forest is a much more fantasy, mythological, and just like much more kind of old-fashioned ancient space. And then A New School is chaotic and magical in a much more contemporary sense. And so I really wanted to be able to sit in all three of those locations and look at the interplay between those three kinds of magic and those three kinds of spaces. And then I also wanted to look at the interplay between those three storylines, because A New School kind of appears out of nowhere. Averno is, the township itself is formed from this kind of ancient, almost original sin of the Turners and the original bloodshed. And then the forest is this very mythological space. And there's this original foundational myth of Aster, who rips open the universe and creates the forest and all of that.
I see. That's very interesting. Does Averno mean something? Does it have a specific meaning?
Yes. Averno is actually the name of a crater lake in Italy, in the sort of Naples region, that in ancient Rome they believed to be the entrance to the underworld.
Wow. That's great. I didn't know that. I love that. So there are so many important themes in Averno, and what I've noticed is there's so much representation in Averno in the musicals. How important was it for you to show representation throughout Averno and everything that consists within it?
That's like the most important thing.
Yeah.
How it happens is so natural, like how it happens in life, and it's not like forced representation. It usually just comes naturally within the art, especially among the artists that we have on the team that draw the characters and do the character design. Diversity just kind of, it's kind of the whole thing about Averno is the forest is a haven for women, people of color, LGBTQ people. It's supposed to be a haven for people who are like put down in society. So it's kind of hard not to have diversity in the Averno universe. Although it is,
I love that,
incredibly important to us.
Yes.
I think while
great.
It's not forced, it is conscientious.
Yes.
Because for me, one of the questions that I asked myself very early on is what does non-patriarchal fantasy look like? Because I adore fantasy. Like, I was a huge fantasy nerd growing up. I read Lord of the Rings for the first time when I was in like first grade. Like, I was massive Tolkien nerd. I, learned Quenya. Like, I was a huge fantasy nerd. However, all of the sort of tropes of fantasy are based off of these ideas of conquest and of like imperial nobility and all of these very patriarchal paradigms. And so when I was creating Averno, I was thinking the entire time about what does a new fantasy construct that does not place like sort of patriarchal religious structures at the center look like.
Yeah.
And when you try to topple that and put something else at the center, it means that you start rethinking everything. And you can't, when you're trying to create an intersectional new fantasy world, like you can't just think about it in terms of like gender and just being like, well, we're going to put women at the center or non-binary people at the center. You have to look at it from all angles. And obviously, we're both white, and we need to be thinking about diversity from all angles when we're creating this fantasy universe. So while it is very natural, it is also something that we've been trying to think about conscientiously at every step of the way, and sort of interrogating who we are representing and trying to actively search out new voices to bring in, because it does take active searching a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's so important. I love that. I mean, and I ask that because it's like, I mean, it shouldn't even be a question anymore, but we're seeing, especially with the change of theater, that, I mean, representation matters, and it shouldn't be a question. It should already have been there. But, unfortunately, the theater industry has some catching up to do. So that's what I love so much, that, what you've done with that. And it's really important. And I think that it is so good that you're also taking that lens of trying to break the patriarchal side of it and sort of build something new. That's the only way things are going to happen and change is going to happen. And, you can do it freely in art like this. And that's what is important.
Yeah.
Now, well, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but I just have to say it. You both are so young in the most incredible way. And you already have the experience that most adults in this industry wish they had with writing musicals and plays. Where did this come from? Were you into musicals growing up? Did you know this is what you wanted to do, create? Did it just kind of happen over time? I mean, and I'm sure you guys know, but you both have to give yourself, credit, because you both are doing what I think many adults, in their later ages wish they could do.
Morgan's just always been this way. Morgan's always been this way.
I love it.
I've gotten very, very close with Morgan's family in the past few months, like to the point where they've basically like taken me in as their
They've
own.
adopted you.
They've pretty much.
Oh.
And Morgan's always been like well beyond their years of like creating things. Always creating things is something that's really important to their families. Always doing something. Always bringing something new to the table. My family's a little different, but I've always kind of been a little similar to that in that I always have had the urge to do something more and bring something new to the table of like life. And when I got into novel writing at a very young age, and then slowly progressed into plays and poems and then theatrical music and songwriting, it just kind of clicked when me and Morgan met. And I've always a lot of the target audience for Averno is often young people who get so invested into stories that they their lives start to become their stories, and I think that's why I gravitated so hard towards Averno, because of how obsessed I was with fantasy. And it's not and Averno's like nothing that I used to read as a kid and used to obsess over as a kid. It's got every bit of magical childlike wonder in it, but it has a new level because it's not structured in the same way that normal fantasy is. Again, back to like the patriarchal thing. It's very fresh, but in a very ancient way. It's how fantasy should have been a long time ago. And it's so beautiful to be a part of. It's like living out a childhood dream of like being able to be like the main character and like jump into this world and create all of this stuff.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And you guys do have a young following. I mean, you're huge, and a lot of it has come from TikTok. I know you both are viral TikTok stars. So, I mean, that's incredible. That must make you feel good too.
And I feel like the goal for me with this is to give these kids who love Averno something that I needed when I was a kid so bad, especially with representation. So
important.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Growing up, I was so hungry. I wanted things so badly, and I pushed myself so hard. Like, I remember when I was in high school and I decided that I wanted to become a novelist. I would set myself a new goal every year. And like the first year I set myself a goal to read 50 books in a year, and then it was 100 books in a year, and then it was 200 books in a year, and then it was 300 books in a year. And I just I drove myself so hard in high school, which it wasn't always healthy, but I just had this pathological need to consume words and worlds and universes. And I think that it hit this breaking point in my sophomore year of college, where I had consumed so many of these universes, and I needed to make one, because I started latching on to all these almost like these blips, when you're listening to a song, or there's a moment in a book, or you're walking down the street and it feels like you've happened across a universe, like you've stepped into another world for a second, and you're like, that's the one that I want to live in. And you just get this fleeting moment, and it's, or the harmonies and the perfect part of a musical theater song, and you're like, it's capturing the world that you want to be in. And I just wanted to create that, but in a way that was sustainable to exist in for a long period of time. And it felt like for a long time I was just consuming so much so that I could understand exactly what it was in my brain that I was trying to push on.
Mhm.
And I had finally gotten enough that I had collected enough images and locations and colors and songs and strange parts of horror movies and weird mountains in Virginia that I like knew what it was that I was trying to form.
Yes.
And I was ready to go. And at that point, I could just like go. And then in the last year, it's been possible to finally just like put it all out there. And that's why it's been possible to make all of this, was because like I'd been ready. And honestly, it's such a natural thing that I think so many people want to do, is just like inhabit a space that clicks this thing in them. There's this like very almost like primal thing, I think, in a lot of like teenagers and women and queer people. And I don't exactly know the intersection of all of the identities yet, but there's an intersection of a lot of subsections of the world that there's this universe we're all trying to get to. And I think that this clicks it for a lot of them.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, now let's talk a little bit about Willow. Within Averno, there are, I believe, it's 3 musicals, right? And plays. I know
We're coming up on 13.
We're coming up on 13.
Okay. Well, I know that. Well, I know the one, Willow, which is very popular. The album was just released, and it's one of the musical in the series. What was the process like to create? Let's just focus on Willow. What was the process like to create that album, and how did you come up with the songs and the cast? I believe Christy Altimore was involved in that as well. So,
Christy Altimore, that was a very, very recent thing that we can thank Broadway Records for helping us get.
They're wonderful.
Christy.
They're lovely.
Lovely people.
They
some of the
are.
loveliest people to work with, really. And Willow started not too long after we met, and actually, like, not after we met, but after we actually got acquainted and started writing together. And Morgan, who usually writes a lot of like dark imagery and like really psychological horror stuff, came to me with this story of the softest group of women who are in love with each other. These 2 stories of these 2 women loving women couples, and this little girl named Meg who has these imaginary friends that she talks to, and you know, she's got pressure to grow up really fast because of a new kid on the way in her family. But these 2 adorable couples who are so in love with each other, and I was like, Morgan, this is you? And Morgan was like, yeah. And
it happens sometimes.
And it's exactly what I've always known that I would be writing at some point, because it fits my aesthetic and it fits my vibe really well. So
Yes.
it was not hard to jump into and just write the story of these women who you know, meet under this willow tree, and in different stories and different timelines, they meet under the same willow tree. And the willow tree is kind of the theme, kind of the haven where they can go to be together and to be happy, and really become one with nature, as it, you know,
Yeah.
it kind of becomes more of like, it's a safe place for them to go to be in love and not have, you know, judgment or outside worries and stresses of the town of Averno, because we've mentioned that the town of Averno is a very stressful place.
Yes.
But the edge of the forest kind of creates a space for them.
I've heard the music, and the music is out. You can purchase it. You know, you can buy it wherever you stream music. But I like it. It's not. And I was saying this to you when you guys first came on. It's not your typical musical. The music is, I don't want to say like folky, but it's a mixture of folk and like new music that you haven't heard, and I haven't heard, and I really liked it. I caught myself. I was listening to. I said, "Oh, I'll listen to a few songs," and I just caught myself. I'm listening to the whole album. It was really good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you guys? Go ahead.
I think you'll find that, in fact, most Averno musicals, in fact, all of them, don't sound like your typical like musical theater things, because the whole point of Averno is that it's just different forms of storytelling, whether it be graphic novels or virtual reality or musicals or animated TV shows or anything. And so it really takes the weight off of musical to do the musical thing. You know, it doesn't have to sound like a musical theater show, because they really can be just a piece of Averno media, which is kind of its own thing. And obviously Willow is the only thing that's out yet, but Willow and Bitter Summer and Over and Out and Gladiator all sound very different. And their Wayward Sisters also going to sound very different. And they're all going to sound very different from each other, because they're basically just looking at, instead of being a musical, using music as a form of storytelling. And if you think about a different instrument or different, you know, using music theory or whatever, all just as different instruments of music or as of storytelling, and have them all having different personalities and having different strengths and stuff like that in order to be able to best convey motifs and themes, then it makes sense that they just sound the way that they sound, as opposed to sounding like a typical musical.
Right.
And what we've tried to do with like musical storytelling, especially, we've tried to come up with like sound dictionaries where we can like assign a certain like, I think if you think about modern witchcraft and how like crystals have properties, each instrument has a different property that it brings to the music. So each different musical, depending on the story, is going to have different properties in the musical that it's supposed to like convey or give off. So the violin is really important in Willow, and then the subtleties in the piano bring its own thing and its own emotion. So it's kind of fun. We like to like let the listeners like figure out, what do these motifs mean? Why do we only hear the piano in these moments? Like, they can kind of pick it out for themselves, and we can like try and give it magic in itself, you know, put magic into the music. And I'm kind of proud of Willow, because I think it does that. I think it does that.
Yeah.
And it's, for a first try at putting magic into music, it's worked. It seems to have worked pretty well.
I would say more than well. Yes. I mean, for your first try, you have an album released on Spotify where music is streaming. You know, while we're on this, and sort of brings me to my next question of, you know, how do you see these works, Averno and Willow, being produced? Do you want to produce each thing separately, each musical separately, Willow on its own, the others on its own, or how does Averno, how does that all sort of tie in? Do you want to sort of have it just solidly be on stage, or in TV, virtual? What is sort of the plan, if there is any right now, that you are thinking about for Averno and Willow and sort of everything in the universe of Averno?
As messy as you can imagine it even messier. The idea is to just break the mold of what we can imagine storytelling to be. Essentially, the idea with Averno is to break down all of the ideas of genre and form and create these things where, you know, the musical motifs of Willow can then be repeated in the scores of the, you know, of films, and we can have those characters showing up in the backgrounds of other musicals, and then the stories of those characters showing up in the epic poems, and like all of these things repeating and showing up again and again throughout the entire thing. Like, we use the metaphor of like a tapestry a lot, because basically the entirety of Averno is a tapestry, and all of these different storylines are simply threads in it, and they all interlock and weave together to form a really big picture. And each of them on their own, you can like sort of see each one as a cohesive storyline. But when you put them together, they gain even more meaning. And each of these things that we're putting out, the goal is always to have them be complete and discrete elements of story on their own. So Willow, what we just released, if you read the synopsis and listen to the album, then you should be able to get a decent idea of what it is. Obviously, it's not a finished product until it's like, you know, on a stage or whatever, because it is supposed to be a musical. But that is one discrete unit of story. However, then it's going to gain more and more meaning as we see those characters in other things, and we see those storylines being repeated and referenced in other moments, and we see those things repeated in other places. For instance, there's another show that has two of the main characters from Willow again years later in a different scenario, and it brings even more meaning to what has happened in Willow. And it's something that like you can totally understand what's happening in Willow and it doesn't change it at all. But then once you see that other thing, it means Willow is even more, you know, heartbreaking and beautiful and poignant.
Wow, that is great. I love that. On the topic of Willow, do you have, I know this is so cliche, but do you have a favorite song that you like the most from Willow?
How to Let Go makes me the saddest because it hits the hardest. But like, as far as like bops, I think Adelaide's Path is my favorite right now. It kind of changes by the week, but Adelaide's Path takes the cake right now. What about you?
Love it.
How to Let Go definitely hurts. We were apart for 3 weeks, which like was really hard. It was a really hard period in our lives.
I don't like being apart.
Being apart is like not good. And I definitely like listened to How to Let Go and had feelings a lot. Real to Me definitely hits really hard right now. That's the one that's about like growing up. And knowing the ending of the entire Averno franchise, that one also hits really hard, as well as the finale. I think in terms of just pure like composition, the finale is my favorite though, because like that ending moment is just brilliant. And like those harmonies, when you wrote those, I was like, that was the moment where like I sat down next to you and I was like, this show is going to like change the game. Like what you just did now is going to be a game changer.
I remember that. I was struggling a little bit, and then that moment in the finale, I was like, whew, that's a finished product right there. I can put a pin in that.
Wow. Oh, that's incredible. So what is next for you and for Averno? I figure during this quarantine, you probably have had a lot of time to write and create more content, but I know that there's been a lot of buzz about Averno, and obviously, as I said before, you've become viral TikTok stars from it. Do you have anything in the works? What is sort of next?
Yeah, many things.
So
I love that.
It's hard to pinpoint because of the election coming up. Things are getting a little bit tricky.
Yes.
But our next project that we are hopefully going to drop is Over and Out, which is a musical by Sushi Sushi. Sushi Sushi is the composer, and Morgan wrote the book for it. Sushi's another composer on the Averno team.
Yes. Incredible
musician, one of the most brilliant songwriters I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So that's definitely look forward to Over and Out. We don't know exactly when the date is when it's coming out, but it's probably going to be our next project.
That'll be the next full-length musical. However, there are going to be 2 secret music things that will happen this month, because we are currently in our All Hallows All Month event, which is a month-long Averno event, which includes Inkverno, which is a month-long Averno drawing challenge thing similar to Inktober. And then we are going to have 2 secret music drops that are happening this month related to that. Live from Averno, which is the podcast hosted by Quinn and Will, who are 2 students at a new school, as they try to unravel the mysteries of Averno, is currently live and dropping 2 new episodes this month. So those are also coming out. And there's one other thing. Oh, there's a secret event that's happening that nobody gets to know about, but you should keep your eyes out for that because it's going to be a big one.
Okay. Well,
lots of secrets.
I love that. Well, I will be sure to keep my eyes out for sure. As we wrap up, I'm very curious. I would love your take as we start to, and we have no idea, of course, when it will return, but as we start to sort of see this new theater come about, what do you see the rebirth of theater being, and how do we reinvent it as we come out of this time of darkness, being the coronavirus pandemic, and into sort of a new world, so to speak?
I mean, this is always a loaded question. I mean, I think it depends on whether you mean like, are you thinking about like the rebirth of live theater when that returns, or are you talking about like what theater is in the meantime before that comes back?
I just meant when, sorry, I should have clarified, when it comes back, when we are able to physically sort of go back and sit into a theater and it's deemed safe for everyone to go back to Broadway, to go back to regional theaters, to be able to actually sit in live theater again. So that rebirth in that sense.
I'm really excited for that because I think that with all of the conversations surrounding Black Lives Matter and surrounding a lot of the really awesome work that theater activists are doing online right now,
yes,
that there will be a much bigger focus on just like diversity and inclusion on and off the stage.
Yep.
And I really, really hope that's the case.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there have already been a few shows announced that are not necessarily giving me all that much hope about that front. Not to name any names.
Yeah.
But definitely like that would be my hope. And then my other main hope would be that as a result of all of this, like people are looking at more like blended approaches to what theater can look like, and looking at more sort of combination like digital and in person, and increasing accessibility to streamed services and stuff like that, because the fact that we don't have access to pro shots is just ridiculous, and the fact that they're dropping all of these pro shots now and only doing it now is ridiculous.
Is that shows, or what is pro shots? I'm sorry.
Oh yes, like professional shots of shows, like what they did with Hamilton. The fact that they're only doing those right now is ridiculous, especially the fact that they are legally, like everyone does a pro shot of their show and they're only releasing them now is just crazy. Right.
Well, you can watch them at the Lincoln Center at the archives. You know, they always film for that.
The fact that you only have New Yorkers able to do that is
exactly. And I agree with you on that one. Because I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's like, why can't it be easier? And it really should be. And we should be able to combine both live theater and streaming. I totally agree with you on that one.
Yeah,
for sure. It doesn't make any sense at all. What advice do you have for others who are, especially younger generation, who are wanting to write their own music, write their own content? Maybe they don't know where to start and are a little lost. What advice do you have for them?
I always say write what you would want to see on a stage, because I actually teach lessons. I teach private lessons to kids who want to write theater and who want to write musical theater, who think there's only one way. Sorry, we're plugging the phone in.
No, it's okay. Believe me, I get that.
Yeah. Because of what has been set up and what has been presented to them, they are of the belief that there's only one way to do musical theater. But my goal is to like present the idea that there's so many different ways that you can do theater and art like that. Podcast musicals, short musicals. It's not just the 2.5 hour sit in the Winter Garden through this extravaganza type show that costs millions of dollars to put on, but there's so many other more personal and like raw one-on-one ways to do musical theater that can be just as effective.
Yes.
So write what you would want to see, write what you would want to experience. Do something that's super personal to you, because that's usually what's going to get people in the heart in the long run and in the end of it.
And
I would also say that right now, like now is the time to do it, because right now there's nothing separating you from everybody else. Like normally there's this whole system. There's Broadway, there's billions of dollars, there's stages in New York and all of these things. However, at this moment in time, none of those things exist. Everybody has access to the exact same thing. And like absolutely no shade on all of the theater professionals. Everybody is doing their best. But if you look at like what the Broadway industry is doing right now, it's iPhones in your living room. And you have an iPhone in your living room probably, which means that you have access to the exact same things as them right now. So like that, the barrier of pretty much everything has been removed. Yeah. So now is the time more than any other time to like go out there and just try it. And I mean, like, that's what we're doing. Obviously, we have a little bit more than an iPhone in a living room because my dad built us a pretty cool, like, bad boy box in our basement.
Thank you, Shep.
Thank you, my dad. The bad boy box is what we call
Thanks to your dad, yeah.
Our homemade studio.
He's great.
Love it.
But, like, other than that, that's pretty much what we're doing. and it's working out for us so far. So if you have a story that you want to tell, now is the time to get out there and do it, because everybody is looking for media to consume.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. And I think that's the new way that art is going to happen is through this way. It is. And it excites me so much to see, and even just the ideas that people have started during all of this too, who never have done anything before. I mean, it is super exciting.
Yeah.
Where can we learn more about you? Where can we keep up with both of you? Learn about Averno? Tell us.
At Averno Town on Instagram and at Averno Musicals on TikTok.
Okay.
And then I am at Mythweaver, as in MYT. Oh yeah, there you go. You have it already.
Yes, I do.
And Augie is at ABI Writes Musicals. There you go.
Yes.
Yes.
That is me.
You had it. That was a trick question. You didn't even need to ask
Go
us.
ahead and follow that, because the name is gonna change soon. Once Instagram finally lets me change my name on Instagram. So
Oh yeah, don't they only give you you only get 1 or 2 times a month or something, right? Or
yeah,
weird.
In 14 days I get to change it. So go ahead and follow now, because soon you won't be able to get to it. Because it'll be something different, like Augie or something. It'll probably be Augie Writes Musicals. But for now, just go ahead and follow Abby Writes Musicals, because otherwise you will lose me. Lose me very quickly.
I don't think anybody can really lose you at this point. You're everywhere.
And where can we
try to lose you at least one time a day.
And where can we keep up with all things Averno, where we want to learn more aside from social media?
Other than social media, the best place is to follow us on Spotify.
Okay.
So if you just search Averno on Spotify, you will find us. We have a website, avernotownship.com. There you go. You have that. Look at that.
Yes.
Which was just recently updated by our awesome concept team.
It's an incredible website, I must tell you. I mean, I was so impressed.
I'm
Thank you,
impressed by them.
concept team.
They slap.
Thank you, concept team.
Yeah, so social media and our website are both places to find more, and then follow us on Spotify, because then you will get automatically notified by all of our new releases.
Oh, I'll have to do that. Okay, for sure.
Yay, because we're going to be
Wonderful.
dropping some secret music stuff this month. So if you want to find
Cannot
out about
wait.
that,
If you want some Halloween vibes,
some Halloween vibes, then
Yes.
follow us for that.
For sure. Well, as we close, was there anything that you want to leave us with? Anything I may not have touched on that you'd like to leave us with before we go?
Stay cool.
Stay cool, kids. Stay cool. Vote.
That.
If you're 18, vote.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
For the love of all the Tully. If you miss theater, vote.
Vote. Vote like your life depends on it, because it does.
It does.
It does.
Does.
It does.
It does.
Your future
So
depends on
important.
it.
I
Yes.
voted today.
Yes.
Still
Oh, good. And New York, if you live in New York, I believe it's state and city. Today's the last day to do it. So make sure you've done it, because it's super important. So
Vote.
yes, please vote. Well, the two of you just make me so happy, and everything you've created and continue to create, and the team you are creating, the world of Averno you are creating, just makes me so happy. And I am so excited for what the future holds for both of you, Averno, and your creative team as well, because I'm going to tell you right now, there is no stopping you, and there shouldn't be, because you have created something so incredible, so magical, and something that is going to change lives for the better. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That means so
Oh,
much. And thank you for having us. This has been so
my
fun.
pleasure. Oh, thank you for doing it. I really appreciate it so much. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know you both are very busy, so really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you take care, be well, and I will talk to you both soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.